one point say,
Yeah.
I want you to be the guy to tell my story. Oh, okay, so first of all, it was how long into the relationship were you when
That's a great question. So I met him in '77, and I think uh, I showed that the first little, I literally typed up a paragraph. I, Stephen Rosen, I'm going to write Edward's authorized biography. Nobody else can do it. And I think that was '84. That was literally one paragraph. I signed it and Edward signed it. So that's 7 years. And then um, I recount the story about going to Edward's lawyer, and there's a little bit more of a formal contract run up, and that was only 2 or 3 paragraphs. I think that was '85. So 7 to 8 years. So it was a fair amount of time that had gone by. Um, and I just sensed that there are going to be writers coming out of the woodwork wanting to write a book about Edward. And not that that was my main reason, but I just thought that nobody else was in a position like I was. Nobody else was hanging out with him, almost daily and doing all these interviews with him. And I thought I could write a good book. I could write a book that nobody else could. And so when I approached him, I said, Edward, other guys are going to approach you to write a book. I'd like to write a book on you. And he goes, yeah, man, I can't think of anybody else that could do it. And that blew me away. And so we signed that first little contract. And then later on, he actually gave me some money, and that little 1099 form is in the book too. He gave me 5 grand, which back in '85 is a lot of money. That was more than generous, and he realized that I was working on the book and gathering interviews, and I had spent a fair amount of time by then, kind of putting the book together from that first contract in '84 to '85. And he recognized that, and that blew me away. Just the fact that he recognized it. Look, the money was fantastic. I'm not going to lie to you, but just the fact that he recognized what was going on. That at the end of all this, it was going to be this book. That's what was important to me, and I kept working on it, And again, I write about this, and Ed, we need to sit down and I need to talk to you about all this other stuff that we don't talk about in the regular interviews, for the magazines, and I wanted to talk to him about his family and his relationship with his mom and his relationship with his brother, and what was he like as a 7-year-old Van Halen back in, the Netherlands, and coming to America. And I mean, God, there was just so much. And with that, it was always, and part of me understood it, and part of me couldn't understand it at all. Part of me thought, when he said, "Well, man, now it's not the right time because we're just about to go in and do another record, and if we do the book now, that means that record doesn't get talked about, Or if they were between records, it's like, well, if we do it now, people think my career is over, because books only come out on artists when their career is over." I tried to say, Ed, that's not true. That doesn't happen, And then at one point in time, he said, hey, why don't we do 2 parts? We could do, from the first record up until the first family record. And then from then on, I go, Ed, that's an amazing idea, because it was germinating in his head. He approached me with that idea. And it was so hard for me to, instill that idea in him that there's this book and it's important and we need to do it. Because I think with Ed on any given day, it wasn't important, or I don't have time for it, or I'll never have time for it. So at the end of the day, it never materialized, obviously. He just never, and it goes back, kind of highlights what we were talking about before about how he sensed himself as a 22-year-old or this 24-year-old. I don't know if he had really a sense of his own legacy or who he was or what he had done to change electric guitar. I don't know. I think about that. What would that book have been compared to what this book would have been? They would have been entirely different. Obviously, you don't have any of the intervening years, though I never spoke to Ed from 2003 to 2020. But it wouldn't have been any of those other years post 1987 or 88 when the book may have come out. I think most of it would have been Edward's dialogue with very little narrative from me. So it would have been a different book. Would have been a really good book, but it would have been different. So yeah,